Today we are making happy mushrooms. Now this is a scalable project. As you can see, I have 3 different sizes. These were all made from a 2-inch block. This was made from a 1.5-inch block, and this was made from a 1-inch block. By block size, I mean the width as well as the depth. So 2 inches this way, 2 inches this way, 1.5, 1.5, and then 1 by 1. For this video, I will be making a 1.5-inch block version of the mushroom. Most of the ones I have made are the 2-inch blocks, so if you are choosing to use a 2-inch block, note that I use the stop cuts here. I did that with my saw, it's way easier, but get started, make sure you got your safety glove on. This is a 1.5 by 1.5-inch block that's just over 2 inches long. I'll put the dimensions for each size in the description below, but for whatever width that you have, the height of the mushroom is 1.375. So if you're using something that isn't, exactly 2 inches or whatnot, and you still want to use it, just multiply times 1.375, and that will get you the height for the size that I'm using. It doesn't have to be that way. Same is true for this little guy. He was 1.37 inches tall because he is 1 inch by 1 inch. This is also a 1-knife project, so you can make it with using only 1 knife. You don't have to if you got specific tools, whatever, but I'll be using a good old Swiss Army knife. I do a lot of carving with my Swiss Army knife. This is a Victorinox Tinker, and I'll be using only the detail blade. So to get started, get your block cut to dimensions and put a line about halfway on each of the sides. Doesn't have to be exact, but roughly halfway is what we'll be using. And then on each of the corners, I put a stop cut. Well, choose your bottom, of course. This was the factory edge cut. This is the part that I cut off, so I'm gonna make that my top since we're gonna round it over anyway, and this will be more flat. So this will be my bottom. I'm gonna put a stop cut in and carve up to it on each of the 4 corners. And if you hadn't done so, make sure your knife is nice and sharp, because it will make your life easier. So I recommend starting at this bottom corner and carving up. You can get a little sweeping motion in it too. That will help you. But we can also do that later if we absolutely need to. So we are just roughing out the stem of this mushroom at the moment. So at this corner, a little sweep up. Or stop, make sure we get that cleaned out. If it doesn't come out cleanly, go back in and clean it up. Make your life easier later. Clean, sweep up, clean, sweep up, clean, sweep up, clean. We're gonna do this all the way around. When you get about here, where you've been able to kind of connect the corners across, and you've got a good chunk of the material removed for the stem, and you can see that, you've got these shallow arcs going up on each side, that's how we know we're getting close to be done with the stem. So what we're gonna do next is I flip it over and we're gonna chop off these corners. And then we are going to round those edges off. Fairly shallow angle. Just round them off. You might actually find yourself rounding off the corners entirely and then go back to the edge. That's okay too. Kind of all depends. It really depends on how round you want the bottom to be. Like if you're okay with it being a little square, a little blocky, then you don't have to do that. I try to get it a little more round than square. I mean, it's a block, so it's gonna be kind of square, but I do try to round this off as best I can. And you see these little patches right here. That is the bare face of the wood that we have not touched with our knife. So I do try to clean that off too. If that means just shaving it off so that some fresh wood is exposed, do that. And the reason is because it takes to the oil and the paint better when you do that. So I do recommend at least passing your knife over just to make that easier. Let's try to sweep up to that a little more. And looks like I'm gonna do this part. And that's our stem. See how easy that was? Now we're gonna work on the mushroom cap. And very similar to what we did at the bottom of the stem, cut off each of these corners. I'm not gonna go all the way down, not yet. We'll get that in a second. Get those corners. And now we're going to connect those corners by shaving off those sides. The mushroom caps are round, so we want to round this off. We will do that by cutting, and then keep attacking those angles, those hard angles. You keep attacking the hard angles, eventually that object will look round. It may not be perfectly round or actually round, but it will give the appearance of it being round, which is good enough for us because we are whittling a mushroom. And then we just keep going around and attacking those angles. To work your way down a little bit so that you have room to keep going, that's fine. All right, when you get to the top, and you got all the sides rounded and you worked your way towards the middle of the top of it, and you get that clean slice off the end grain, the top of our cap is done. Now we will finish the sides of our cap. Now we do that, well, we knock off these corners here first. And much like we did before, we round over these edges. Now be a little more careful with this one because we're not gonna go super crazy with our rounding here. We want it to be a little round, but we don't want to like mimic the top of the mushroom cap underneath because the mushroom cap is somewhat more flat underneath. So we do need to round over those edges, but not to the extent that we did the top. Okay, now in the same way, this is that bare wood from the block itself that we haven't touched with our knife. We do need to make that go away as well. So we will just, in very shallow cuts, very shallow angles, do our best to make that rounded over so that it paints better and looks better. Goal here is to make that mushroom cap look like it's a half dome rounded over, which is kind of hard if you've never done it before. I remember the first time I made a walking stick and I tried to carve a ball on the top of it. It ended up being more like an oval on top of it, closer to the shape of like a football than an actual ball, but it took a long time to carve that. So if you've never tried to make a square block round, you might be surprised on how much goes into that. All right, we're looking good. Looks like a mushroom to me. Carve up to that. This is probably going to be our face, so I'm going to try to make just a little bit more space. Easier space, I should say. little more shallow on this side. There we go. All right. Next, we draw on the face. You can make the eyes as big as you want. I do think it's easier and looks better if you make them a little bigger than you really expect them to be. Gives you more room to work with. And give them that little smiley face. There you go. And actually, this if you were to paint the base brown and the top green, this could be a little happy tree. So that's kind of funny. This part gets a little tricky with it being the smaller piece. This is where the 2-inch block is actually easier than the 1.5 inch or the 1 inch. So to carve the eyes, around the circle that we drew, you need to go straight in as best as you can, but also still try to make that circular cut. So it is a little bit of a challenge. So if you need to practice on something else, no harm there and no judgment for me there. This is something that I do not consider myself super good at, and I'm still kind of learning how to do it. So this is a challenging skill. Challenging part of whittling for sure. So we go straight in as best we can. I know it's hard to see. Go straight in as best you can. Still working with the grain as best you can, while still moving that knife, because you don't want to have like in, and you get these like super hard edges, almost like an octagon or something. You don't want to do that. So in as best you can, get that straight across, try to connect those cuts. It is a little bit of a challenge. Just trying to get that on the camera as best as I could for you guys. But work with the circle that we drew to follow the outline of the eye and connect your cuts. After you do that, we are then going to be working the edges of those cuts. Those are essentially our stop cuts, if you want to think about it that way, to remove that material. So we work from the outside of the eye towards the inside to clear this stuff out. So we're working toward the edge of the eyes. To clear it. To clear this material. And it will help if you've got like a brush or something on hand. I've got a toothbrush that I use to sweep away wood chips and dust and stuff, because that'll build up in here with these cuts. So you can kind of see that. Not quite as clean as I'd like it to be, but there is a point where you gotta say good enough is good enough. And when you paint it, the paint will actually help a lot. It'll kind of clean up some of those mistakes and some of those fuzzies in there for you. So don't go too crazy if you don't need to. I will say I have made carvings worse by trying to do too much, so gotta exercise some restraint, some self-control on when to stop, because you can do too much and actually ruin some carvings. I've definitely done that. So we're doing that same thing with this eye. And we're going to now carve the mouth. So how I carve the mouth is very carefully put the tip of the knife in and turn it ever so slightly to get those kind of dimples almost. And that creates your like your starting point and your stopping point. And then we put our knife in, carefully connect those two lines. So I'll do that again, just for carefully connect those two lines. And then we will ever so slightly go over kind of the top of the mouth there. Let's clean that part out. And we'll do the same thing on the bottom. Just kind of round that out. You might have to go from both directions, that's okay. And then in the corners, just put the tip of the knife in the corners, just like this. Get a little chip cut. And in one corner, in the other corner, get your chip cut. I'm gonna run over the top of this again just to clean it up a little bit. Get a brush out, brush it off. And then after I've done all that, I usually take my knife and just go over the top of them because it's easier to cut off the pencil marks than it is to paint over them or try to erase them, at least I think it is. And then we just go around and do some cleanup on the details. Like I want this to be in a little bit more on the stem. So I'm gonna clean that up. Clean that up. Clean that up. Maybe a little there. But there you go. That's your happy little mushroom. You can paint them whatever colors you want. I mean, I've got some that are, you know, I got blue, green, red, teal, pink, purple. You know, we got some all sorts of different colors. They can be Christmas ornaments. If you got a magnet, you can put a magnet in the back and stick them to the fridge. These guys definitely would be, great magnets. I didn't carve, I don't know if I said this earlier, I didn't carve the eyes in the mouth for this. It was just too small, so I just painted those on. Still looks okay, I think, especially because he's so little. So it works, I think. But there you go. I hope that was fun for you. Leave comments below if you enjoyed that, and if there's anything else you'd like to see how to carve. I'm happy to hear what it is you'd like to see. So thanks for checking out the video. I'll see you later.